Okay. Well, we'll jump in here. We know what happens there. So just wanted to throw a little work session in here. We're looking ahead to 2022 as the bigger context, in addition to giving you some updates for some of the things that we've been working on since we last spoke 2 weeks ago that are rather urgent. Jason and I have been speaking with some of you and just trying to figure out how do we get from half-time up to full-time, because we're just seeing this suite of opportunities and work that, whether we created or not, we need to be there and present to be responsive to. So wanted to get some feedback from you on a straw proposal that we put together. But first, we're going to jump through a little engagement update for you. Then kind of do it super fast because we only have an hour. The intention is not to rewrite our strategy today, but just to put our strategy back out there in front of all of you so you remember the various areas that we've got, get that out to you. And that's something that we can pick up again at our January meeting. How do we adapt that strategy? Is it still looking good, or do we have some different priorities? And then the funding straw proposal and a couple of other cool year-end updates that we'd like to get in front of you and hear what your thoughts are. BOEM, as you know, that's been our primary focus there. Want to really encourage them, and to the extent that we can, support those influential forces that will help to make it easier for them to stick to the schedule that they have been talking about at their task force meetings and in other venues, which is to release the draft call area early in next month, perhaps, for the draft call in January. As you recall, we wanted to connect with the governor's office based on her trip to Scotland, and excellent rapport with Amisha, bringing her up to date on this opportunity. She leaned back in on her new transportation, energy, and climate policy advisor, who was very recently appointed, and suggested that she set up a meeting with Jason and I to hear what our thoughts were for priorities there. So we did have a very good meeting with her. Kind of takeaways, I'll just run through them, and then Jason, go ahead and chime in with your thoughts too. But it sounds like we're on track for BOEM. Basically, we introduced the issues, the priorities, gave her the information that we have you all. We've got a lot of industry members who are very engaged. On the ocean side, there are a lot of coastal citizens who are already very engaged, and we want them to go ahead with that timeline. If there was any assistance that her office needed to help support that, we were offering that, including meetings with direct members of industry. Let her know that you're very interested in meeting with her, that we are starting conversations with Scotland around an MOU. It's very low-hanging fruit, and that an executive order for 3x30 as a development roadmap for Oregon would be an excellent, very clean and strong signal for the governor to consider in this final 9 months, 12 months that she's heading into of her service. She was definitely receptive, asking good questions that indicate that she's listening to what we're saying. They're really saying it's not necessary for us to lean in at this time. Take a look at her title. She has a really full suite. And we got the distinct impression that this BOEM call area is not an issue from their perspective. Let's go forward. Thank you for letting us know who you are. And let's reconvene after the calls are out and see what the next priorities are. Jason, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a little bit. And if you want to, I know you had some excellent slides highlighting some of the key points.
Right? You just push down on the grid and you press the up.
I'm not sure whose that is.
Somebody mute their line.
There we go. Jason, were you looking for a different slide?
I'm not seeing any slides. It's not showing on my end. Is anybody else seeing the slides?
Oh boy, there's a problem. Here we go. Thank you. Could you enable me?
Just did.
Thank you.
You're such an enabler.
We try to be. There you go. Perfect.
Yay. Okay.
Yeah, so just some sort of observations from our end. You know, we went in priority number one, hoping to gauge from Amira Streeter whether there was any indication that the governor's office was going to slow the BOEM draft call area announcement, which continues to be announced, or BOEM continues to state they're planning to do that in January/February. And as Shannon mentioned, we got the impression that that I remember her saying something specifically, is like, if something along the lines of BOEM is driving the train on this timeline. So it's pretty clear to us that barring some new development, I don't think the governor's office is going to slow this. I think we're going to see call areas announced in draft call areas announced in January/February. So that was our number one priority. After that, we, as Shannon mentioned, we put forth some ideas of how we might engage. We do get the sense that the governor's office is energized a bit about the offshore wind opportunity, and I think Shannon might have sent around a excellent interview the governor did recently, and coming back from Scotland and COP26, and number one topic on her list was offshore wind. And so we want to leverage this, right? We want to make the most of this opportunity, and we feel like over the next year the governor could do some things that could help expedite the entire thing. And so we want to help her do that. So we put forth some ideas. Amira initially was basically, I think given her newness in her position and all the things in her title, Transportation, Energy, and Climate Policy Advisor, I don't think she's got the capacity right now to be thinking about this stuff. And I don't think she thinks it's that big of a deal. Things are moving forward. But where we did leave it was after the first year, we definitely want to circle back with her. Excuse me. Still getting over my nasty gold. We want to circle back with her and bring her some of these proactive ideas. We threw out a few, the executive order, MOU, some obviously meetings with industry. So we're gonna lean on that the first of the year. But the summary of this is, I think we're full steam ahead with the governor's office to see BOEM call areas announced in January, February. Anybody have any comments, questions about that?
Yeah, Jason, this is Jason. That's great that they're not interfering, but are they going to be supportive, I think, and even pushing BOEM? I think it's not, I don't know if it's naive to think that BOEM is going to do this all by itself without the state weighing in, and I think that influence is really important, and I'm not sort of hearing that willingness to be active in that role.
It's good question, Jason. And others on the call have a deeper familiarity with BOEM processes than even I do. And my sense is that BOEM has received the green light from the governor's office to tackle this first priority of announcing the call areas. I know the state personnel, Amira mentioned that she had been meeting with Department of Land Conservation and Development about this. Andy Lanier and Patty Snow at the DLCD are point on this, and they are very proactive on it and very supportive. So, given what I'm seeing from the federal level and the aggressiveness of the Biden administration on offshore wind, in some ways, I think BOEM might be driving the train here. They're the ones that are pushing the timeline. And unless the governor's office or the state throws up a roadblock, I feel like BOEM is moving as quickly along their timeline as they can. Anybody else on the line have some thoughts on that?
Jason, this is Craig, and I'm, up here in Seattle, so I'm not in the middle of the Oregon situation, but that seems exactly right to me. That, I mean, the administration wants to do this, and so they're going to do it unless they get pushback from the governor. So yeah, I agree with Jason E. that it would be nice if the governor was also, actively pushing them, but a green light alone, and no further action, I think feels to me like it would be plenty sufficient for Bowen to proceed with the call areas.
May I interrupt for just a moment? I'm just noticing, we switched over to the Poet platform, and I think we got a couple of our meeting invitations crossed. I just noticed Scott Strickland on the line. Scott, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I wonder if you're wondering what on earth what are we doing?
I'm a little confused. I was looking, any kind of community involvement or partnership that we can do. I'm with Operating Engineers Local 701. I had everything on mute and was kind of glancing over to see, but maybe I'm out of place here. If you want me to jump off, I would take no offense.
Yeah, I think you'll probably, we're going to go tangential here into a whole bunch of other proceedings, but it's interesting because both you and Randfist, it sounds like too. So we must have been talking about a meeting earlier in that. While we have you, before you jump off the line though, that's the other part of our governor's office advocacy is we wanted to make sure that our new energy and climate policy advisor was up to speed for obvious reasons. Next stop is labor. So we're very interested, and these are some of the industry representatives that are very interested in helping to remove the barriers and get as many folks employed here, make this a good economic benefit for everyone here. So hopefully you'll be back and you will get a more appropriate introduction.
Sure.
And we'll stay on topic.
Yeah, no, we're more than happy to help. I know we've done a lot of work with developers and utilities as well with project labor agreements and community organizing and involvement to help push these projects through, especially in renewable energy. So I think, we're super excited for it. We're super excited to help and be a part of this in any way we can. So I'll throw that as my little, hook pitch to start, and then look forward to meeting everyone else at another time.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, no worries.
And I will add back to the conversation we were having that actually, I didn't get this in the bullet point, but that she led with that while Bowen's steering this process. And I did let her know that we've heard twice privately from Bowen that they are to take the direction from the state. They don't want to be the big feds coming in. At least that's how they would like the process to go. And let her know that that the more support that we can get directly from our state agencies to Bowen, the better. And that kind of sets the table for some of the other work that we've been doing in the same space to help her and others get more comfortable with standing up a bit more overtly and rigidly around this. We also Jason provided a lot of great input on to Ocean on a letter that they put together in response to the Audubon letter. We did submit that, and we also specifically copied Surfrider and Audubon leadership on that, and I've heard back from both of them very constructively. In fact, Surfrider has already organized a Surfrider Portland chapter meeting and asked me to provide them with an offshore wind update, and that's scheduled for very early in February. And Audubon Oregon is looking for a time to get us on their lineup. So that's good. Definitely copied Amira Streeter on that, so she's aware that this conversation is going on, and if she hears any concern from that area, that we're actively working on it and have a very viable path forward that takes care of their concerns and allows us to stay on our timeline. SCDC and Ocean are also pushing for some regional solutions and business organ funding. One of the other points of pushback, even before that letter from the Audubon and Surfrider, as you may recall, was that there was a lot of concern about impacts to ratepayers and fishers. Poet supported my time to develop and work with Exodus Group on a scope of work that would specifically look at the socioeconomic impacts of that 3x30, as well as a local benefit strategy. So we can start to have an open conversation about what those impacts to ratepayers and fishers might be. Then took that to a meeting with both of the cities down in Coos Bay and North Bend, the director of the Port of Coos Bay and Coos County Commissioner Crivens, to specifically ask for their support in getting that work done. So we're continuing to push there. There will be a series of offshore wind briefings scheduled. The first of them has they already picked it up with Coos County commissioners with renewable hydrogen and offshore wind. Port of Coos Bay is trying to figure out who it wants to be when it grows up, and we're trying to help give them information that would help with that decision. And then finally, Renewable Northwest, who we'll be talking with again later today, has offered to table leverage our network of NGOs with their network of NGOs and bring them all together for a briefing on what the project siting process is for offshore wind. It's something different and new to the area, and to try and really grow that coalition of support and understanding to make it easier for the governor's offices, as well as our agencies, to really stand up strong and say, yeah, this is a good process, let's go. Get steel in the water. So pause there for a second.
By the way, folks, SCDC is South Coast Development Council. That's Sean Gibbs is the executive director, and they are the go-to local pro-business development entity that's very excited about this and should be thought of as a partner as we move forward.
And I believe he hasn't confirmed, but I did ask their director, Sean Gibbs, if he had availability either for our January or February IAG meeting, so you could all meet him directly. And if you as individual organizations want to schedule some work through him, you have that intro and access. Finally, on the draft call schedule, Jason picked up that there was an open RFI from BOEM. They are working on proactively on a West Coast mitigation strategy. That RFI is open until January. Took that and used it as another opportunity to just follow up and increase the existing level of trust that we have with the South Coast-based fishing leadership and get that out to him. So he was very thankful of that, acknowledged it, and we kind of have penciled in to get the fishing community together with members of industry in and around the Port of Charleston / Coos Bay later in the spring. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have offshore wind drinks that we're scheduling in Coos Bay for January 20th at the request of Representative Brock Smith and Representative Wright. So we will definitely be using that to help increase understanding. Local conservation leaders who are very skeptical of any industrialization will definitely be there. You are all more than welcome to come down. We'd love to see you.
Shannon, let me ask folks on the call. So that BOEM mitigation strategies RFI, OWC group from OWC has been talking about this and trying to decide what a industry-backed approach to that looks like. I know that some of the folks on the call today have participated in those calls, and you know there's clearly appears to be some interest in establishing a fund that would compensate fishers, excuse me, for impacts to their bottom line. I don't go into all the details here, but the short version is that it seems like folks support the concept. that it ought to be run by a federal agency who would be making the determinations about whether there has been an impact, and that the funding for that ought to come from lease sales and royalties rather than additional money out of pocket from industry. That's the short version. Is anyone on the line today leaning in on this? Do you have any interest in talking about it? It seems to me a very interesting opportunity for us to take a proactive stance on this and get out in front of what that looks like. But other than the couple of conversations at OWC, I haven't heard any chatter about this with folks. Any thoughts from industry today? Has anybody even heard of this RFI? Sounds like no. Shannon, I think we should send this out to the whole group here, just make sure folks know this is out there.
This is the fisheries mitigation, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm aware of it. I know a couple others on are as well, but I don't have anything, but I don't have much more to add. I have been involved in the conversations with OWC, and there is an effort to determine how or whether OWC should engage in this. And there was, I think, a decision to wait a bit and see where ACP, the national organization, came down. They just provided comments in a BOEM listening session yesterday. The ACP, what do they call it? So it's let's see, the ACP fisheries working group or something like that. So I mean, feel free to send the RFI around, Jason. There's some activity. Unfortunately, I'm not able to speak much more or say much more than what I've said.
Was Varner part of that conversation? Varner Seaman?
The conversation yesterday?
Yes, about fisheries.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Certainly, it would be good to have
it's something that's actually being spearheaded by Ruth Perry.
Yeah. Well, I'll reach out to Ruth about this. It'd be very good, I think, if we could have some common messaging, and to be able to submit something supportive of a general position that ACP and industry in general has gotten behind.
Okay, I'll circle that around after this meeting. And then after this initial RFI closes on January 6th, then we have another public comment period I want to say it's the end of March, maybe beginning of April, which makes timing for any of you who are able to join us down in the Charleston area to meet with fishing leadership in person at that time in a casual setting pretty good, because we will have seen BOEM's draft of their approach to this strategy. Really quick, resource adequacy. We had our workshop yesterday. I'm going to send around with our meeting slide deck to Stephanie. I'm going to can't. Jason, can you try and meet Stephanie?
Yes, hold on.
This is Trenton, New Jersey.
How's that?
Thank you. At our workshop yesterday, we were taking a look at staff's proposal that was based on, stakeholders have been exchanging and trading proposals for this for some time. So staff kind of took a hybrid approach to that. Yesterday, we were talking about that. The outcome of that is that there will be informational filings made by all of the ESSs. They will be consistent with those filings that are being required for voluntary participation in the Western Resource Adequacy Program that's rolling out in its non-binding period at the same time. So we're going to see those by the end of January. Staff's going to take a week or so to truth that stuff up, make sure they've got the units, because remember, everybody's got apples and oranges and grapes, and it's going to be interesting this first time through. And then they're going to get that back out to us, and we're going to have a workshop. We tried not to get too far in the weeds yesterday, although it's very tempting. It's of concern to some of us there that these initial informational filings and that then the RAP program itself will become the by default kind of precedent that's set for Oregon's resource adequacy. I don't feel that that's an appropriate move. Very, very, very happy, big win, folks, and it's very specific to this industry. When we started talking about modeling platforms back in capacity, even before anyone was talking about offshore wind, we were talking about what are some economic ways that are responsible that we can get more transparency and best of science integrated into our energy planning systems. When PNNL started doing their work and releasing that on the grid values of Oregon's offshore wind, and then more recently NREL, the staff has leaned in. POET has been specifically advocating in both the resource adequacy and capacity dockets for staff to consider an open framework and to work with our national labs who are already doing best of science work. The PUC is underfunded and overburdened. The utilities know that. And they are appear to be trying to lean in and say, well, let's just use the contractor Estrape that has been hired to do the resource adequacy at the RAP and let them take care of our resource adequacy. Staff put that as their third option. They're not leaning that way. It's not transparent. There's potential for a conflict of interest, and it's expensive and they don't have any money. Whereas they are actively speaking with US Department of Energy and our national labs to roll forward there. So that's awesome. Confidentiality remains a big issue. The IOUs want to use the confidentiality agreements that are in the RAP. Everybody else would like those to be like the thing that we get started with maybe, but let's get some greater transparency. We met in the middle, and we should be seeing a little bit more transparency for those of us specifically engaged in UM 2143. So we'll get to, we will gain access to more of the information that's necessary to evaluate RA. And the other big one is reliability metrics. We've got this 1 in 10 LOL, loss of load events. So we've been talking about 1 in 10 days and one day in 10 years or one event in 10 years. Staff recommended event in 10 years. We said, great, what does that mean? What's the footprint? How are we defining this urgency? Staff has proposed a ramping statistic that's kind of interesting, whereby if you were to ramp up eventually to a 12-hour, that's what they're defining as a day, a full day event, 12-hour in 10, then that means that you should be at the reliability of 6 hours in 5 years, and you should be, and just kind of ramp that down so that the very next year, you have a much smaller outage allowance, basically. And as it gets farther out into the future, then you're looking at larger events. It's an interesting approach. Again, we don't have to bust out our comments again right now, but we're going to pick this up again in February. So if this is something that's of interest to you, or you're engaged in these conversations in other jurisdictions, please work with us more on this. So I'm going to jump through the engagement strategy and why we're looking. We're thinking that it would behoove everyone for me to work full-time specifically. This is what we have for our engagement strategy. Again, it's adaptive. We're building an airplane while flying it, realize that. Promoting industry's vision for 3 by 30. How do we get 3 gigs by 30? What does that look like? So we're working with BOEM, we're working with labor, we're talking to the courts, we're talking to economic development, and we're trying to get this get everyone to integrate best practices from you all, which also means facilitating the conversation with you about what those common best practices are for you all and how that would play out in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, we're working with the governor's offices and advisors. Energy, workforce, and business development are the 3 primary. She does have natural resources, but we've got DLCD working that, and that's its own agency to engage with. Public Utility Commission, really its capacity and resource adequacy. In a nutshell, it's all about advocating to make sure that this technology, floating offshore wind off of Oregon, is accurately and appropriately, we have the right resource profiles, locational values are being recognized, and that we have something to provide, and that the PUC or whoever it is at the end of the day that's running checks and balances on our resource adequacy and procurement solutions has up-to-date data, and that we are integrated into it. Same story, just blow that out to the regional grid, energy grid integration. So making sure that we are there, that this technology is there and recognized, and all of its values reflected in the portfolio assessment and infrastructure planning spaces. Part of that has been talking to various members, and so far as we socialize this concept, we've heard nobody opposed to it, which is to support a Pacific State MOU for floating offshore wind and renewable hydrogen in the Pacific Northwest energy grid, and arguably for the entire Western grid. These two are kind of peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and honey, whatever your pleasure is, but peanut butter and jelly, probably blackberry, Himalayan blackberry in the Pacific Northwest. But let's all start talking about this. As you know, we've got our heads in this game all the time, but other people are thinking about other things, and they really still have no idea how vast this opportunity is. And we've got a lot of work to do to meet it.
Shannon, real quick on the hydrogen piece. So I want to be clear that I understand that, of course, hydrogen is a different thing here than offshore wind. However, hydrogen has emerged as an amazing leverage point for us with offshore wind. The offshore wind opportunity in itself, as great as it is, received initially sort of lukewarm response from some of the coastal leadership, and this is completely predictable. This is their knee-jerk response to anything other than logging, fishing, and sort of their traditional industries. However, that's changed in large part because of Shannon's excellent work down on the South Coast. But the hydrogen piece has just changed the whole dynamic of this conversation. These folks have gone from, arms crossed, like, okay, tell me more, to leaning in on this, and they're really excited about it. And I don't want to belabor the hydrogen piece, but I do want to be clear that we understand this is not necessarily in our wheelhouse, but it has emerged as an amazing opportunity. And I think folks must know that there is this notice of intent to issue a funding opportunity, and the numbers it might be changing a little bit, but it's somewhere between $8 and $9 billion to build hydrogen hubs around the country, the regional hydrogen hubs. And out here in the Northwest, there is a huge conversation going on with us, with Obsidian, with Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, with Maritime Blue group in Washington, and Charge, which is their new hydrogen group that stood up, and we're all pulling these hydrogen hub concepts together. And one of the things that I'm doing is trying to make that one big hydrogen hub concept so that we can compete with other regions that are doing the same thing, as opposed to putting forth multiple discrete projects that aren't integrated, which I think handicaps the Northwest competitively. So this is a big conversation. It's far bigger than me, and I'm barely hanging on, but I am kind of pushing the entire thing in the direction of having a comprehensive Pacific Northwest hydrogen hub concept that includes a Coos Bay offshore wind component. I'll stop there, and happy to chat with folks about that offline, but it did want to explain why it is we're continue to talk about hydrogen.
Well, it's also specific why we specifically mentioned it in HB 3375. The idea being, if we get 3 gigawatts of offshore wind, then the electrolysis can be sized to absorb whatever our existing grid can't. So let's go ahead and keep up with this scenario for 3 by 30. Let's not let the grid can't handle more than 2.6, or we would have to, I mean, we're all trying to design this up. There's no reason we still can't do 3 gigs. The grid doesn't need to limit us. Department of Land Conservation and Development, at our last meeting, we went through they've got some rulemaking updates that they're going to do that will definitely be requiring our participation there and consistent tracking. We don't even have their implementation of our climate adaptation framework for the state, which definitely we were heavily engaged in providing draft comments for. Oregon legislature, short session, hopefully that's not going to be too big. Basically need to be available to respond to something that comes up. If Representative Brock Smith really wants to lean in and go for a potential carve out for floating offshore wind in the state clean energy statute, then we better be part of that conversation. And as we go forward through this session, we do have an open invitation for framing up supportive legislation that we'd like to see next full session. And the idea would be that we can be working on that now and vetting that and stepping into next September with something that's pretty well socialized and already has deep coalition understanding and support. And then building coalition and cultivating our elected leadership and champions. Jason E. had brought up the renewable energy retreat concept. The meeting tomorrow with Solar Oregon. There's a couple of organizations that are talking about this. So stay tuned, we'll have an update on that, but looking at right at the end of our short session. So it would be April-ish that we would be getting together. So there's a lot to do. Full-time engagement goal is to, that we have set, and this is what we're putting out here for your feedback, if you agree with the goal, is full-time policy director. So that's $120,000 funding goal. Poets hoping to, they have continued to help pay for my contract. They always pay me on time. We're good there. But they are definitely filling in wherever they need to, even at the halftime position. And also to look for other non-monetary resources so that the IAG members, as appropriate and desired, can lean in and take more active roles in some of these areas of advocacy. So here's our proposal that the membership in the IAG, it's 12 months. We've got 2 renewal periods because that's just kind of how it shook out in our inaugural year. We had some of y'all that stepped on right at the beginning and jumped in, and we got started in September. So that was through that last part of the year. And then as we were making headway and the legislation got going, then we had some more interest, and we've got another suite that kind of came on late spring and summertime. So we've been wrestling back and forth with how to balance and structure this. In the first year, it was $5,000 across the board, and Poet stepped up with an equal match. And as I said, they overstepped because they needed to. So here's a concept for you, is if we had different kind of tiers of membership, that offshore wind developers would be based on domestic megawatts in the pipeline. Kind of like how much are you looking at, what size of a player are you looking at being in this market? I took, that's just my first stab at what the breakdown would be in terms of what those megawatt thresholds are. And then on the value chain member side, looked at the domestic annual revenue threshold and did kind of a similar. So I'll be quiet now and see if anyone has any thoughts, or Jason, you wanted to add anything.
Sure. Just to, we definitely, we need to hear from you, because this is an imperative for us. I cannot continue to fund Shannon without your support. So we've done what we can as POET, using revenue that we've earned from our contracts with Department of Energy, or from our conferences, or various contracts we have at national labs. But we need your help. And I think Shannon is laid it out pretty clearly here. We need to go to full time. There's more work to do even than that, but this is where we need to start. We are very open to the details here. We want to hear from you and get your feedback on what works for you. But I think this is an imperative, and we're hoping that you agree. And I'd like to just pause there and hear from you, because this is all about you. We can't do it if you're not going to be engaged.
Hey, I have a question. The offshore wind developers, based on domestic megawatt pipeline, is that pipeline US wide? Is that pipeline what we think we might be interested in Oregon? And I guess if it's the latter, then it leads me to ask, how do we even know, how can we assess that without a call area, lease areas, know what leasing might occur?
It's actually and that's why I was proposing that it be domestic pipeline. I know some of you have got pipelines that are already in the work on the East Coast. It's just a concept. So what do you think about that? Is there a better way to approach that?
I guess I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I appreciate the thought and the idea, and it certainly, I think, designed to generate discussion. But I think, well, let me put it this way: if I were an East Coast developer, which I'm not, or representing an East Coast developer, I might say, why should I be paying that much more than everybody else if we're just focused on Oregon?
I agree with you, Mike. I think this is Ross. I think it's a bit complex. It would be probably easier just to have a fixed price to meet your budget needs. And if you want to separate it out, with two levels, one for a developer and one for the value chain, that's your choice. But I think it's too complicated. Just make it simple, at least for the second year.
Thank you both for that. I like the simple approach. I think we were trying to accommodate the fact that the companies are not all equally well capitalized, and I think we're also trying.
But Jason, RWE, we don't have anything. Well, we have our project in the Gulf of Maine, which right now is one turbine. But I'm not trying to speak to spend more money. But right now, that's all we have. And therefore, that's not representative, given the fact that we do have aspirations to do significant amount of work on the West Coast, including Oregon. So, I think that it would be unfair in the wrong way to have other developers carry the financial burden that we would benefit from.
I see your point. So if we did have a flat rate, we started at 5,000, and that's not enough. We crept it up to 7,500 for a recent round of renewals, and I think I actually haven't seen the number. Maybe 2 or 3 have renewed at that level. Are folks comfortable if we just continued to creep that up and moved it to 10,000 and agreed to keep it there for a couple of years?
This is Carolyn Miller from Avenga Renewables. Appreciate the added stakeholder engagement and outreach and responsibilities that are associated with the increased cost. I'll just have to circle back internally with management to review before providing a response. But I definitely agree with Mike, and keeping it simple is better for the flat rate, especially Avinger Renewables, obviously East Coast developer with Project Pipeline, looking to expand into the West Coast, but definitely a simple flat rate is better, especially for larger companies kind of already planning the 2022 budget and what was already included and approved, to circle back with management for revised costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Jason, one quick question. Can you mentioned, or maybe Shannon mentioned, the POET funding piece of this versus the IAG. Can you just explain a little bit more what that means?
Yeah, so when we first stood up the IAG, I hired Shannon, even though we didn't have membership or money in pocket from the IAG. So what I proposed at that time, which we did, was I agreed to match IAG contributions up to $35,000 so that we could get Shannon locked in for the first year at halftime. So I put up $35,000, and we have exceeded that. I've continued to supplement so that Shannon can stay engaged. Moving forward, I can supplement a little bit. It kind of depends on how well our conference is and how many contracts we get, et cetera. And but this mostly has to be an industry supported initiative. So we're just looking for more or less have IAG members fully funding Shannon for her full-time position.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Since you've spoken about the value chain members, we know that there are a number of companies that are not project developers that want to be engaged in this conversation and want to be helpful. We want to accommodate them as best we can. So maybe the same admonition around keeping it simple for developers applies to the value chain members as well. Should we just have a flat rate for value chain members? Any thoughts on that?
It might be easier for the first year, I guess, or maybe a stretch of time just to kind of see and evaluate how it goes. But I think it's great to see. I appreciate it being a service value chain member to see a distinction between the developers and the service providers. But I think we're happy to contribute.
Thank you.
There are other organizations that have a membership base. This is Talia Kruger with Principal Power. I've said we are part of other organizations where they have prorated their membership as per the range of the revenue of the companies. Yeah, there's something that because it's definitely a great disparity between the money that different developers or different engineering companies that are huge with other smaller suppliers or smaller companies. Yeah? So I wouldn't think that it would be sort of, we try to keep it simple, but then at the same time, if there are more companies that want to be part of the base, would see the membership price prohibited and they won't be participating. So that would be just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Yeah.
Jason, Shannon, this is Stephanie McClellan. I apologize. I'm on a train, so I have a mask on, and I hope you can hear me.
It's just fine.
Okay, good. I just have a question in terms of, is there any organizational structure or governance modifications that are expected or anticipated with a higher level of financial engagement? I mean, most of these programs that have developed an offshore wind program, hiring an offshore wind staff person, they then tend to involve, those paying members at the higher level in in a different way. And I'm just wondering if you're considering anything like that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephanie. We've been talking about that. It's sort of an obvious model. Obviously, OWC, the distinction there is between essentially what are board members and non-board members, those that vote on policy issues and those that don't, and simply are able to participate and contribute, but they don't vote at the end of the day. That model is, I think it could work. It's sort of, to me, it's sort of implicit in this design. I feel like the developers are the one at the end of the day need to decide if there's a question of policy or strategy or whatever it is. I think everyone should be able to contribute to that conversation. But if it comes down to a vote, then I think the ones that are paying that premium probably should have that ability. Is that what you're? Am I?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily focused as much on voting rights, but just the setting of the agenda, the priorities, the strategic direction of a program. These are all, what it is that any offshore wind steering committee that gets established when it is that folks are paying for a program. That's what they tend to end up doing. So I'm not advocating one particular way. I'm just posing the question. So, thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that it's still consistent with how I was thinking about everything we do in terms of where we're leaning in on this stuff. To date, we're doing it all, right? We're focused on every forum that is relevant at this point in time. We're trying to be there and manage those issues. Moving forward, I think we all recognize that we're sort of moving into second gear here, right? So with the call area identification or draft areas in early 2022, my hope, I suppose, an expectation is that industry is going to become even more engaged, and that is definitely informing our thinking on we need to step this up a notch and make sure that we're being responsive to the needs of the sector. I've had this conversation with a few of you. How are we doing on that front? How can we do it better? And this is definitely part of that growing process. I think it's exactly the right conversation, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And the only reason I went back to this slide is I'm just looking at that last bullet, and I think perhaps I've stated it too softly. That absolutely, as we go forward, and whoever you're working with, if it wasn't me as the policy director, whoever that is, that industry lean in as hard as you possibly can, please. It's been our intent, even through this first year, to facilitate the development of the strategy, to get your input and adapt it. So steer the ship is where we're looking for industry to lean in there. And whether that is at that higher level, what's the whole, holistic strategy, and or those areas of policy that you've got a lot to gain or a lot to lose or a lot of resources in. That's what it's going to take, as you know, from engaging in other sectors. Things are going to blow up here really fast.
Yeah, I think that I do want to emphasize, as soon as those draft call areas get identified, the conversations, the heat's going to get turned up. You're going to start hearing from fishers and concerned stakeholders. It's been an easy ride thus far. Quite honestly, it's been much less contentious than I expected. But definitely, our expectation is going to get turned up a notch. So we have plenty of work to do on that front.
It's going to be real.
It's going to be real. Yeah, it's going to be perceived as real here by folks.
So I'm hearing consistently that we simplify this. We've got two levels. We've got developers, one rate, simple. Value chain members, one rate, simple. Let's look at better articulation around what roles the developers take in steering the conversation, and at the end of the day, making those determinations. And then we'll, depending on where you are in your renewal schedule, then have get your renewals up for you for hopefully renewing. And the other side of this is growing the membership.
Yeah.
Those first step, two-step.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay? Speak out, okay. We've got 1 minute, so super quick. Jason, you want to jump in?
Let me just jump in here real quick. So I had a conversation recently with one of our members here, and it really got me thinking about what we would do with our conference. And the short version is that I'm proposing that we move away from the traditional structure of, a couple days, day and a half of panels, the sort of classic conference model. And instead, I pulled together a concept paper that is essentially an offshore wind summit that would bring folks into Portland immediately following OWC's conference in California. So folks are out here already. That event is over at early afternoon on I believe the 30th, at March 30th. And we would bring folks up immediately, and we have basically 2 days of activities engaged. We're not going to be chatting. We're not going to be talking at you. These are going to be work groups. And we're planning, we're chartering a flight down to Coos Bay so we can get you down there for a full day of engagement. We've been talking with folks in Coos Bay about what that looks like, and we'd like to get you in front of, thank you for joining us, Thalia. Take care. Get you in front of the main leadership in Coos Bay that are pretty excited about this stuff. Also get you in front of the source group, South Oregon Ocean Resource Council, which is the primary fishers group. Get a tour of the port, and we'd put you all up at the main casino hotel there that's in Coos Bay. And I will follow this up with this one pager that I developed showing you the details of this. But essentially what we want to do is invite industry to Oregon to hear essentially why Oregon is a good idea. The offshore wind development is why it's tracking quickly, why it may be an easier pathway forward than perhaps California, even though we're essentially a year behind on leases. We are in a very different scenario here, especially with regard to our regulatory community. So we want to sort of make that case and give folks a chance to meet with the utilities. I've convened the utilities in something we call the Forward Initiative. I'm going to bring the utilities to the table and give you a chance to meet one-to-one with the different utilities in the region. There's some other pieces I'll include in the one pager, but we did want to get this out in front of you and see if this is something that you all think is valuable, especially as opposed to a traditional conference where we just host panels for 2 days. So it'd be much more activity driven, and we'd be busy. We'd be moving around a fair bit, getting you down to Coos Bay and back, and try to get everybody home on that Saturday. Not sure what that date is right now, but that if you're looking at your calendar, it would have to be, in order to do the Coos Bay trip, you probably won't get home till Saturday. That's the main drawback there. We'll follow up with more about that soon.
Yep, we'll be putting some stuff together. We'll give you an update on POTS that's scheduled later for today, but more on that. It looks like the Bonneville Environmental Foundation has offered up $20,000 funding match for that program. So that's wonderful.
Let me clarify that real quick. So you all know about the Forward Initiative, the utility-based thing. Bonneville Environmental Foundation funded me to do that. They made an additional $20,000 available if we could come up with $20,000 to match it. I've convinced them that that money could be best spent funding the POTS initiative. That's the Pacific Offshore Transmission Solutions Work Group. We've got somebody doing all the work there pro bono. Bill Henry is fantastic. but he's getting paid nada to do this. And I want to secure him with a small contract so he can continue to lead on that. So we are going to launch some sort of, if BEF signs off on this, which we should know soon, we're going to try to launch some sort of fundraiser in early 2022, industry and beyond, I think, to raise that 20K so that we can secure the BEF funding and put it toward POTS.
And I had stated that our next meeting was going to be January 5th. I had my weeks crossed. So it'll be January 12th, and you'll see an invite come out from Poet for our regularly scheduled meeting.
Great.
And enjoy the holidays, everybody.
Yes, yes. Enjoy Puerto Rico.
I'll try.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. See you in the new year, and don't
All right.
hesitate to reach out if you want to chat about anything.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Lane.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
everyone. Happy
holidays.
holidays.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.